Hello and welcome again to yet another episode of This Week in Christian History. And we are focusing on this week of June the 8th on a death date of one of the most prolific humans to ever sit down and put a pen in their hand, I think, who is commonly known as G.K. Chesterton. And we are visiting with the president of the Gilbert Keith Chesterton Society, the Society of, I should say, the Gilbert Keith Chesterton and Dale Ahlquist, who is the president there. Dale, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
I'm happy to be with you, Nick.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, prolific is probably just not even a close enough word, is it? For and the breadth and the depth of somebody who wrote as much as Chesterton, everything from fiction to poetry to theology, apologetics. I mean, he's all over the map, right? But he's not like he's all over the map because he can't be focused. He's just, it seems to me, he's just got that much in between his ears, right? He's just got that much that he's thinking about that we fortunately get to read about. Is that a fair assessment, or is that probably not even close?
That's very fair, but even that doesn't, of course, even approach summarizing it because it is mind-boggling how much Chesterton wrote, and his writing career basically spanned the first third of the 20th century. We're
Hmm.
celebrating the 90th anniversary of his death, June 14th, 1936. And from basically 1900 to 1936, he wrote more than just about anybody's ever written. And you've hit the things. Writes all different subjects, if it's theology, philosophy, politics, economics, art, literature, magic, you know,
Oh, really? I
yeah,
didn't know magic.
everything. He just whatever the subject is, he has something to say about it. And but then he wrote plays, he wrote poetry, he wrote detective fiction. He actually wrote some really pivotal detective fiction in the early 20th century. The first antidote to Father Brown, I mean Father Brown was the first contrasting detective to Sherlock Holmes, because Sherlock Holmes was the super sleuth, and Father Brown, the little priest, the little humble priest who doesn't look like a superstar at all, seems to be able to solve the problem that nobody else can solve. And so he
Right.
did that.
Right. Well, how fantastic, dude. So how do you give us some overview, just maybe a background, of his life and did he finish university? I mean, did he?
No, no. In fact, he
Yeah.
did. He went to a really quite reputable preparatory school called St. Paul's School in London. People like John Milton went there, and Field Marshal Montgomery went there. But
Okay.
Chesterton would have been considered, in hindsight, one of their most illustrious students, except he was such a bad student.
Oh,
He was mostly a daydreamer. He won a poetry prize while I was there, which is the only way he advanced from one grade or one level to the next. But his parents were told by the headmaster, don't even bother sending him to the university. It's impossible to teach him anything.
wow.
And so he went to an art school. All of his good friends went off to Oxford and Cambridge, but he went to an art school and dropped out of art school too because it didn't hold his attention. This was in the 1890s. Impressionism was on the rise. He had no
Mm.
interest or love in Impressionism. He said that was going to be the downfall of art. He predicted that it would be. And of course, the Impressionists look good compared to what happened after them. But
Right.
at the time, he said, when the lines start blurring, he says, art, like morality, consists of drawing the line someplace. And so
That's
he
good.
dropped out of art school and started working for a publisher as just reading books, being the filter whether they should get published or not. And then started as a journalist in the right at the beginning of the 20th century, and as a journalist wrote over 6,000 essays. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. I mean, do you think, modern day, coming through an education program, they'd have probably tried to put him on ADD medicine, right? I mean, just to make him focus in or make him think that's what he needed to do instead of kind of letting him be the delta of the flood that he was, right? And let it just
Yeah.
go wherever it went, right?
That's a really good point, Nick, because he was such a horrible student, and they might have tried to drug him into compliance, which would have made him, would have destroyed him. And of
Yeah.
course, going to university might have messed him up too. So God protected him from a lot of things by that unique mind that he gave him, and he just had a way of seeing things that seemed to be there quite complete from the beginning. But he was not raised as a creedal Christian as such. He really had to discover Christianity, and that story is told in his book Orthodoxy, which is it's just a great Christian classic. It's probably unlike any book of Christian apologetics that anyone would ever read,
Mm.
because he doesn't take the normal approach, which is we're sinners, right? And original sin's the only doctrine we can prove, right? Instead he says people don't even acknowledge sin anymore. They don't even believe in the reality of sin. So let's argue, what's the most sane philosophy? What is the most sane philosophy? Chesterton says, you're not convinced the philosophy is true because it uh, because something proves it. You're convinced it's true when everything proves it.
Mm.
And he takes the approach that Christianity is always proved to be right, no matter how it is attacked and from what side or on what grounds it is attacked. It always turns out to be right, and it's a wonderfully original approach to defending the faith.
No doubt about that. But now he started out in the Anglican faith, right? And
No,
then
no, he started out
converted
as
or
we'd call
oh,
really a Unitarian.
okay.
And so his conversion to Christianity he would have entered the Anglican Church at that
I
point.
got you. And then from there, then he had a conversion experience into Catholicism,
Right,
right? So he was,
1922, he became a Catholic, and he really said it was one steady progress. He's just a great. He was embracing historical Christianity, and so he had a great a great sense for the fact that the truth goes from one generation to the next. He says, if a philosophy is true on Tuesday, it has to be true on Wednesday as well.
you can't, you can't stop it.
Right, right, and so
Right.
there's no truth that's new. It's always the old truth that's still true.
Well, what was it about that do you think across doctrinal and theological spectrums, right? I mean, whether somebody is, you know, hardcore Catholic or slipping in and out Protestant, whatever it is that they might be, regardless of which way that they might personally think otherwise, it just seems like he's got an appeal to all of them at some point. They might have, right? I mean, there could be Protestant Catholic conversations and dialogue and, theological tit for tat and back and forth and having but at the end of the day, it seems like anybody who is trying to learn can find something in the world of the things that Chesterton spoke about that says, I'm not with him on those three things, but these 14 things over here, I'm with him on that. And I love to be able to hear
Yeah.
from him. I
No,
mean,
that's a
so,
good point too, because I've dubbed him the apostle of common sense, and I think that's part of his great appeal is that he utters universal truths that we all know to be true, but we didn't even think about it until he said so, right? We just go, "Oh yeah. Yeah, I never thought about it that way, but of course that's right." And Chesterton, with all his great quotations, his great witticisms, it's just one little pearl of truth after the other that most everyone can agree with, and that's why he has such a wide appeal, not
mm,
only among Christians and all of the differences, among the Christian denominations, but with non-Christians as well, because Chesterton's truth is truly universal. And when people disagree with him, that's when it gets fun because he loves to argue too. So he'll take you on, but it's such a joyful battle. But he says everything should be a good fight, he says.
well, are there reports of that whenever he did get into those debates and did those things that he was Was he able to bring his wit and his humor and things like that to the table? Because that's always such a powerful weapon, right? If you call it that in an argument or a conversation like that, if he can bring, humor or a good one-liner or something else to the table, that's pretty hard to combat against.
Yeah, he was known as the man with no enemies because even though he had his philosophical opponents who just absolutely disagree with him, whether it was on politics or economics or on faith, they couldn't help but like him because he was so charming and amicable and truly a loving man, and they were drawn to that, and
Mm.
they wanted to be friends with him, and they wanted to have the argument too. They enjoyed the argument, and people would pay to watch him argue with other people.
Oh,
His
really?
debates were staged all across. Europe, and then he made two U.S. appearances as well. He came to the United States twice, and he had a debate with Clarence Darrow that is never talked about. Everybody talks about Clarence Darrow's Scopes trial with William
Sure.
Jennings Bryan, but nobody talks about the time that Darrow debated Chesterton in New York City, and the crowd voted for Chesterton 2-1 that he had beaten Darrow at his own game. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that now. What a fascinating thing to talk about. How did all that get set up? I mean, is it kind of like in a way we would think of people invited him to come and to do these things, or do you have a
Yeah, no,
publicist in the way
yeah.
we think of it that would say, "Hey, we need to do a tour," or how did that work at that time period?
No, even back then in the 1920s and 1930s, he had an agent who arranged all the speeches for him throughout the United States, and it was the agent who put together the debate with Clarence Darrow, as well as debates with other different celebrated thinkers and writers, so they could mix it up. And but Chesterton, in all cases, arguing, defending traditional truth against modern fads, against the rise of divorce, against feminism. With Darrow, he was arguing about the truth of religion, that people will always return to religion, no matter what new scientific discoveries there are, that the religious truth doesn't change, and there's nothing that science can do to disprove religious truth.
Wow.
And
And so Darrell had already, I mean, the Scopes trial was over by that time,
yeah,
right? By
Scopes
the
trial was
time,
over,
yeah.
and by that time, Clarence Darrow was no longer practicing as attorney. He was just going around the country making his money off of lecturing. That's what his living was.
How about
And people, he was such a great debater. People were
Sure.
worried about Chester debating him, but not only did Chester hold his own, he beat him. He beat him hands down.
What was the venue? I mean, did they do it at a university or did they do
No,
it
it
in
was
a
it was
stadium?
a Masonic temple down in downtown New York because it could hold 4,000 people, and that's why
Gee, me. How
they
about that? How great. How great. Are there
yeah.
recordings of those? I mean,
There's no recordings, there's no transcript, but there's reports, and so in one of my books, I've cobbled together the debate as much as I could. It's that book's called let me see, that's the book Common Sense 101. No, I'm sorry, The Complete Thinker. Sorry, it's my third book, The Complete Thinker, and the appendix there is a recreation of the Chesterton Darrow debate.
how fun. Well, hey, that just got on my list. Okay. So I want to
Okay.
make sure that that got to do. Hey, we're enjoying our conversation that we're having with Dale Ahlquist, who is the president of the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton. And we're learning all things about G.K. Chesterton and about his impact. So tell us, uh, does he reflect back on kind of taking others down the path of how he came to these different theological, I thought XYZ, and then I thought that, and then that bothered me, or I chewed on that a while, and I said, and then I came to this,
Yeah.
thought, and then I moved here. Does he kind of walk a reader through his
Yeah,
progress?
I think that the book I mentioned earlier, Orthodox, he talks about how he was looking for the sanest philosophy, and Christianity kept coming up as the one that answered the question that the other philosophies did not. And then he also noticed how the other philosophies attacked Christianity, but attacked it for opposite reasons.
Mm,
And he said maybe there's something wrong with the other philosophies that they don't mind contradicting each other in their attempt to discredit the church. And he says that the it kind of proved that Christianity maybe was the thing in the center, and everything else was on one side or the other. And so there is an autobiographical aspect to the book Orthodoxy. In fact, he even calls it my slovenly autobiography. It's my elephantine adventures in pursuit of the obvious. Because once you know the truth, it just seems obvious.
Mm,
And he argued in such a way that you could tell he had a complete understanding of what he was saying, but he was trying to find the most eloquent way and the most appealing way to present the truth so that it looked as obvious to the person he was talking to. The other important book he wrote, I think, I mean, he wrote a lot of good books, but the
mm,
two pillars of his writings would be Orthodoxy and the Everlasting Man, which was written in 1925, and that is basically a history of the world in between two covers of a book that's broken up in the same way that the Bible is broken up.
mm,
The There's a section before Christ comes, and there's the section of what happened after Christ stepped on the stage in history. And he basically shows in a completely, again, unique approach how everything that happens before Christ clearly is pointing to him, and that the world's problems are all begging, for a solution, and it comes in Christ. And that when Jesus enters history, everything changes. Nothing is the same after that, and nothing can explain who Jesus is except the Christian explanation. The other explanations just don't work. And that was the book that C.S. Lewis read when he was an atheist, and he said that was the first uh, reasonable presentation of Christianity he ever read, and that's really the book that really led him to become a Christian.
Well, just a few episodes back from the time that we're recording this was May the 11th was of this year was the 100th anniversary of the first meeting of the Inklings. And
Mm.
so to think about that, we had a great conversation with a scholar in Oxford, Dr. Michael Ward, who
Well, he's
walked us
great.
through, all about Tolkien and and Lewis and the others that were a part of all of that. But I thought it was really interesting. What I wasn't aware of was that when they first started to meet, uh, he uh, I just lost my train of thought. Anyway, but when we first came to meet, right, uh, 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 Lewis was not. He was a Christian. He was still an atheist, right? So I
Right.
mean, so this is right in the midst of him being able to write this apologetics type of book, right? That Chesterton I'm speaking of, that is laying it out in a way that somebody like a Lewis would need to hear it,
Yep,
right?
yep.
I
That's
mean,
a perfect example. And the fact that was the book that did it for C.S. Lewis, and his book, Mere Christianity, is really a restatement of all the arguments in The Everlasting Man by G.K. Chesterton. Chesterton was just hugely, hugely influential on Lewis's thinking, on his writing, on the metaphors that he chose. You can see Chesterton's fingerprints all over his writing.
hmm
And
hmm
what surprised a lot of people is that everyone assumes that Chester was somehow part of the Inklings and that they all knew each other, but they did not. They
Really?
Lewis and Tolkien never met G.K. Chesterton.
How about that?
Yeah, it's kind of blows your mind. They lived in the same country, and Chesterton was famous. They knew who Chesterton was, and they were at the start of their career, so he never even knew who
Right,
they were.
right.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about his family. I mean, did he was he married? Did he have kids? Did they all still hang around? I mean, what was that like?
Sure, he was married. His wife Frances. They were married in 1901, and she played a huge role in his own conversion to Christianity. He said
Mm.
that she was the first Christian he'd ever met who was happy, and, and so that says a lot, doesn't it?
Right.
Just what Christian joy can do to help other people discover the truth.
Mm.
But But the great tragedy of their lives is that they had no children. They wanted to. They were
Mm,
expected to have a large family, and it clearly she had a biological or medical situation which she
mm.
sought help for, and they visited many medical experts, and at a certain point resigned themselves to the fact that they weren't going to have children. So then they basically filled their house with other people's children. They had foster children and
Huh.
would host no adult allowed parties at their house. And Chesterton loved to have the chaos of children around him even while he wrote, which is remarkable. So he could write in virtually any setting at all, whether it was a busy, crowded pub or a railroad station. And usually he spent a lot of time in railway stations because he usually missed the trains he was supposed to catch. And so he liked the chaos.
Almost kind of like the absent-minded professor, huh?
Oh,
Right?
very
I mean,
much. He's the epitome of absent-minded professor. He's the one who got into a cab to go somewhere. He gives the driver the address, and the address is across the street. And so, and he said, absent-mindedness is simply present-mindedness about something else, and
there you go.
and that explains it exactly. He was just always thinking about something else, and the details. He once went and delivered a letter to an editor to tell him that he couldn't make it to the meeting that they had scheduled. And of course he arrived at the time of the meeting to deliver the letter to say that he wasn't able to make it. Things like that.
Well, how did the corpus of all of his work uh, after he died? I mean, was it left in some type of a trust, or was it left with a group of trusted friends, editors? I mean, how
Yeah,
did how did all
his
that keep
his
going?
his pa he willed his literary rights to the Royal Literary Society, and but the papers themselves were just stored in the attic of his
Mm,
secretary, who had them there for 30 years.
really?
Before maybe 40 years before the British Library came and picked them up and took them to the British Library. And so that's where all of his papers are now. And when they came to pick them up, Nick, they said there's more here than one person could possibly have written. They were just astonished by how much material there was.
Well, were there little gems in there that people had forgotten, or little vignettes,
Well,
or
yeah,
poetry
what's interesting
pieces?
is
I
there's
mean,
very little unpublished writing because most everything he wrote was published. And
huh.
but the answer is yes. There's all kinds of little gems. And I've been studying Chesterton for 45 years, and I'm still discovering wonderful little gems of his writing. Everything he writes is consistent to other things he's written. So you're all when you get more Chesterton, you go, oh yeah, that's so good, that's so good. And yeah, we continue to dust off these things that haven't been seen for 90 or 100 years.
Wow, he is the fount of ever blessing, right? I mean,
Amen. Amen.
that never ceases to do. Did he when he got an idea of something that popped into his head? If you're going everywhere from, Father Brown to poetry to apologetics and deep and wide apologetics, right? That did he just kind of stop at a time that he was thinking, pull out a journal, had some paper, and just start writing and writing and realize, oh, it's time for dinner. I just have gone down this rabbit trail. Or did he make notes and go, hey, note to self, go back and think more about this thing?
Yeah, he would write instantly as soon as he had an idea. So he usually had paper with him, but he also wrote on the cuff of his shirt, which of course his wife really appreciated him doing. And of course he would stop in the middle of traffic when a thought occurred to him, and the rest of the world would disappear so he could get that thought down on paper.
Get that thought. Well,
Yeah.
give us the stats on all of it. I mean, what are the stats of how many
Yes.
things total or as much as known that we would say uh, between essays and articles and books,
Yeah. I'm going
plays,
to do
is there
some
one big
show
number?
and tell
Okay.
here. One second here. Here it is. Okay. It's always good to have a visual here, Nick. All right.
There we go. There
One
we
of my
go.
great colleagues is a Norwegian scholar. His name is Geir Hosnes.
Okay.
The last 35 years plus, he has been assembling a bibliography of Chesterton's writings.
Okay.
Here's the
Oh,
bibliography.
shit, man. They,
It's 3 volumes. It's 1,200 pages. This is the bibliography. So Chesterton wrote, uh, between how you define a book. He wrote between 60 and 100 books. Some publications are smaller. Some people might not consider them a book, but 100 separate things that came out, within the time of his life. Some of it was original for the book. Some of it was a collection of things that had been previously published.
yeah.
He wrote about 1,200 poems. His short stories are about 90. That includes the Father Brown, the other mystery stories. Uh, and then his essays, which would be the work of his journalistic career, is over 6,000. Okay, and so if you wrote an essay a day, without taking Sundays off, it would take you about 18 years to write 6,000 essays. And then you can start in on your books and your plays and your poetry and your Father Brown stories after that. In addition to that, he was in demand as a public speaker, and he would often be giving lectures. And part of our research was to just track down newspaper accounts of the public speeches because that gives us an account of more Chesterton material.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have an entire transcript of a speech, but sometimes we have a newspaper report with 3 or 4 paragraphs of the speech. But that's more Chesterton material, and most of that is accounted for in this bibliography. But that's just more of his creative output that has been assembled.
Sure.
So
Did his poetry gear around any one kind of potential, I mean, typical thematic things, or was it religion, philosophy? Was it nature? Was it the human? Was it quips and quotes? I mean, was it
yeah,
humor? I mean, what was
it was
the?
all those things. Yeah, he wrote his two most notable pieces of poetry is he wrote a book-length epic ballad called "The Ballad of the White Horse," which is one of the last great epics written in the English language. Came out in 1911. "The Ballad of the White Horse." It's a book-length poem, and then another poem that's about 7 pages long. It's considered one of the great 20th century masterpieces. Is Lepanto. It's about the Battle of Lepanto when basically the Christian United Forces defeated the Muslim Turks in 1571. They could have easily conquered Europe at that time, but it was sort of a miraculous battle. And Chesterton has this rousing, marching military poem with this wonderful rhyme and meter to describe the battle. And so then he
Okay.
wrote some really charming small poems like The Donkey, and so his poetry is very lyrical, lots of alliteration in it. It shows the 19th century influence on it, but he kept defending and writing in rhyme and meter when all that was falling apart in the early 20th century. He was a great critic of free verse and the nonsense that poetry stopped being poetic.
Well, you think that was part of the reason that he enjoyed having the children around is because he was able to, did he read to these children that were staying with them or
Oh
the
yeah, he
neighborhood
drew
kids
pictures
or?
from his art's another great aspect too. He's a wonderful caricaturist, and we have thousands of his drawings that exist too. And but some of those were drawn for children. He'd make up fairy tales and illustrate them for the children too. You can imagine how valuable that stuff is now.
Right. In real time, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
probably while they were there, right? I
that's
mean,
right.
his mind would take the story in a different spot, probably depending on how engaged they were. If he sees them
Yeah,
starting to doze off, well, maybe we need to do something more,
yeah. No, the children who as adults gave accounts of being with Chester and said it was just magical to be with him, and and he was especially in awe of little girls. He would always stand in the presence of a woman, and that includes standing in the presence of a little girl too. And he said nothing frightened him more than a little girl, but he always treated her like a queen. So
His wisdom never ceases. That's it,
right.
right? Right. We can all use a little bit of that, a dose of that,
Yeah.
I'm sure. So tell us about the society. How did the society come together, and what you guys do, and what is involved in that, and tell us how people can get involved.
Sure. Well, when I discovered Chesterton, there just weren't a lot of people reading Chesterton. That was back in 1981 when I started reading him, and there were definitely just a few pockets of interest here and there.
Hmm.
And I was doing my best to evangelize this. You guys, you got to read this guy. He's amazing. And most of his books were out of print in that time too. And just a group of friends that I'd managed to get infected with my own enthusiasm. So well,
Uh-huh.
let's start a literary society and try to expose Chesterton's writings and his ideas to more people. This is what one of the most popular writers in the world during his lifetime, and he just went into total eclipse
Yeah.
after his death. And so then the revival of interest in Chesterton began in the late 80s and early 90s is when it really started to uh, get a little bit of a groundswell of support. And then
Mm.
I was privileged to do a television series on EW10, the Eternal Word Television Network
Hmm.
on Chesterton, and that ran for 15 years, and that really gave Chesterton some exposure that he hadn't had for a long time. And
Hmm.
so the interest, now is worldwide, and 70 of his books are back in print, and a lot of things have been reprinted that haven't been seen for 100 years. And so we publish a magazine, Gilbert Magazine. It's the best magazine in the world.
Yeah.
And it's just filled with variety, but also with a bunch of Chesterton quotes, those nuggets, those pearls
Yeah.
that are irresistible. So, and that's the membership and the information. What we do is available at chesterton.org. Chesterton.org. If you go to chesterton.com, you'll get hydraulic valves. So
Okay.
go to chesterton.org.
Don't go there unless you're looking for a valve. Come back.
Yeah.
Okay, go back and do the .org piece to do. Well, tell us about the books that you've written on Chesterton.
Sure. My first one was called The Apostle of Common Sense, and it's just an overview of Chesterton's most important books. And then my second one was called Common Sense 101 Lessons from G.K. Chesterton. And that is Chesterton by theme, by the main themes that he writes about. And those two books sort of supplement each other. They're not there's no repetitious material in there, so they both serve as good introductions. And then the next one is the one I referred to earlier, the Complete Thinker. That has the appendix
Hmm.
on the Darrow debate, but that's sort of looking at the world now through Chesterton's eyes and some of the main issues we face now, and shows how prophetic Chesterton is, and so that's the theme of that book, The Complete Thinker. And then I've edited a bunch of Chesterton's books and put together collections. One's called The Story of the Family. Chesterton
Okay.
is very prophetic in his defense of the family and shows how the modern attack on the family is just disruptive for the entire society. A strong society has strong families. Chesterton knew this. He knew that the attack on divorce was the acceptance of divorce was going to
Mm,
be
right.
devastating for the family. He saw the attack on children, through contraception and then abortion. He saw that coming. He predicted that it would, and now at the other end, he predicted the use of euthanasia. All prophesied by Chesterton. But he,
And we're talking about over a century ago
yeah,
that he's
it's
doing these
incredible.
things. Right.
It's like he's looking at our world now, but he's writing about it then. And so it's why he's such a delight to read because your jaw just drops at the insight he has on these
Hmm.
very basic principles that are affecting us right now. He talked about, the attack on sexual morality. He said that's going to be the next great attack. He said this in the 1920s. The attack on sexual morality will be the next great heresy, and he was right about that too. So that's the book, The Story of the Family. And then I just did a couple years ago a new annotated version of The Everlasting Man. So
Okay.
the book we talked about and about that influence on C.S. Lewis. So it's I introduce it and fully annotated, then offer commentary. So it's kind of takes you through the whole book. And then my most recent book was a result of over 30 years of research, and it's called I Also Had My Hour, the alternative autobiography of G.K. Chesterton.
Okay.
And so before he died, he did complete an autobiography. And it's a great book because it's by Chesterton, but it's disappointing as an autobiography because you want to hear more about him,
Right.
and he writes about other people and other things. He does tell a few things about himself, but not as much as you were hoping to get. And so what I've done and did over the last number of years is go to his uncollected journalism, the stuff that most of which has never been republished, and I would take out little bits here and there where he would talk about himself. And I stitched together a narrative of his life in his own words that truly is an alternative autobiography.
It's not a term we get to hear every day, right? I
No,
mean,
no,
right,
that's a new
right.
one. Yeah,
You may have coined that one, right?
I
That may
hope
be a
so.
may be a part of all of that too. So, well, what an absolutely fascinating conversation, and it's so good to know, and so grateful that those of that there are people like you and others like you who will spend your time and energy and effort making it more compact and easier for those of us who might want to dip our toe into the world of Chesterton, you know, 1,800 different points of entry, right? I mean, that you
Yeah.
could get to him. And so at least there's this a pool to pull from to be able to do that.
Yeah,
So
well,
thank you so
it's
much for,
been just one of the great pleasures to have chosen Chesterton as my passion because he keeps paying back over and over and again. Wanted to add one more thing, Nick, and
please do.
June 14th is not only the 90th anniversary of Chesterton's death, it's my birthday.
How about that? Now it's starting to get a little scary. Okay, I mean, no wonder now you're really drawn in, right? Right. You don't have anywhere to go. All I've got is Dwight Eisenhower, and we're not talking about him today. So I mean, that's even mo better, right? As some folks might say to do. So Dale Ahlquist, thank you so much for spending time with us today and helping us to learn more about this great thinker, great writer, great apologist that we are able to focus on within Christian history. So, for those of you who are enjoying our conversation, we hope that you will make your way back at least to our website, to the Center for Christian History.com, find out things like our tidbits of Christian history today, as well as other previous podcast episodes, and sign up to be a part of what we're doing. And I hope that we can count on your continued thoughts and prayers and support. So thanks again.